April 21st, 1943, Hill 609, Tunisia, North Africa. Captain Philip Reisler crouched behind a stone wall, watching the most feared weapon in the German arsenal lumber to a halt 300 yards away. The Tiger tank, designation Panzerkampfwagen VI Tiger Ausführung E, was trailing smoke from its engine compartment. Its crew had abandoned it minutes earlier after an American artillery barrage had damaged the cooling system. The 56-ton beast sat alone on the desert hillside, damaged but intact, containing secrets that Allied intelligence had been desperately trying to discover for over a year. Reisler was an intelligence officer with the 1st Armored Division. He had explicit orders regarding Tiger tanks: photograph them, document them, under no circumstances approach them. German crews routinely booby-trapped disabled tanks. Mines under the hatches, grenades rigged to the turret, explosive charges inside the hull. Approaching a disabled Tiger was suicide. Every Allied intelligence manual stated this clearly, but Reisler was looking at something Allied engineers had only seen in blurry reconnaissance photos and sketchy reports from the Eastern Front. A Tiger tank, intact, disabled but not destroyed, potentially recoverable. He made a decision that would either earn him a medal or a court-martial. He radioed his battalion commander. "We have a disabled Tiger at grid, November 87423. Requesting recovery team and explosive ordnance disposal. I'm going to secure it." The response crackled back immediately. "Negative. Do not approach. German forces are counterattacking. Withdraw to defensive positions." Reisler acknowledged the order. Then he turned to the 12 men of his intelligence section and said something that would be recorded in official after-action reports as either brilliant initiative or complete insanity. "We're going to capture that Tiger and get it back to our lines. Who's with me?" What happened over the next 11 hours would become one of the most audacious recovery operations of World War II. Against explicit orders, under constant German artillery fire, with enemy forces attempting to recapture or destroy the tank, Reisler and his team would not only secure the Tiger, but somehow get the 56-ton monster back to American lines. The intelligence gained from examining this single captured tank would change Allied tank development, influence tactics across all theaters, and provide American engineers with their first detailed understanding of German armor technology. But first, Reisler and his 12 men had to accomplish the unthinkable: steal a Tiger tank from under the nose of the Wehrmacht. The Tiger tank had entered German service in August 1942 and immediately became legendary. Reports from the Eastern Front described a tank that was virtually impervious to Soviet anti-tank guns, could destroy any Allied tank at ranges beyond 2,000 meters, and dominated every battlefield it appeared on. By early 1943, the Tiger had achieved almost mythological status. Allied tank crews feared it. Allied commanders struggled to develop tactics against it. Allied intelligence desperately wanted to examine one. The problem was that Tigers were rare and jealously guarded. Germany had produced only approximately 500 Tigers by April 1943. They were deployed in heavy tank battalions, Schwerpanzerabteilungen, that were carefully husbanded and committed only at critical points. Finding a Tiger on the battlefield was uncommon. Finding an intact, recoverable Tiger was essentially impossible. German crews had strict orders regarding disabled tanks. If a Tiger couldn't be recovered immediately, the crew was to destroy it. An 88mm round fired into the ammunition storage would gut the interior. Thermite grenades would melt critical components. Under no circumstances should a Tiger fall into enemy hands intact. But April 21, 1943, was chaos in Tunisia. German and Italian forces were collapsing under Allied pressure. The Afrika Korps was conducting fighting retreats across multiple sectors. Unit cohesion was breaking down. In this confusion, Tiger No. 251 of Schwerpanzerabteilung 501 had suffered a cooling system failure after an artillery near miss. The commander, Oberfeldwebel Kurt Müller, had ordered the crew to abandon the tank when its engine overheated to dangerous levels. The plan was to recover it after dark, when German forces regrouped. But Müller hadn't anticipated that an American intelligence officer would attempt to capture it first. Captain Philip Reisler was 28 years old, a mechanical engineer from Detroit who had worked for Chrysler before the war. He understood tank design at a technical level that most infantry officers didn't possess. When he saw the disabled Tiger, he didn't see just an intelligence target. He saw the opportunity to answer questions that Allied tank designers had been asking for a year. How thick was the armor really? How was it constructed? What was the gun's actual penetration capability? How did the transmission handle the massive weight? These questions couldn't be answered from photographs. They required hands-on examination, preferably in a laboratory in England or the United States, which meant recovering the Tiger intact. Reisler's first concern was booby traps. He detailed Sergeant Robert Chen, a former demolitions instructor, to carefully approach the Tiger and check for explosives. Chen spent 45 minutes examining the tank exterior. He found no obvious booby traps, but that didn't mean they weren't present. Internal charges could be rigged to detonate when someone entered the crew compartment. Chen reported his findings. "Sir, I don't see external traps, but I can't guarantee what's inside." Reisler made the call. "We need to check inside. I'll go first." The decision to personally enter a potentially booby-trapped enemy tank demonstrated either courage or foolishness, depending on perspective. Reisler climbed onto the Tiger's hull, noting immediately how massive the vehicle was compared to American tanks. The armor was visibly thicker. The construction was heavier. Everything about the Tiger radiated power and menace, even sitting disabled. He approached the commander's cupola carefully. The hatch was open, which was both good and bad. Good, because it meant access was easy. Bad, because open hatches were ideal locations for booby traps. Reisler examined the hatch mechanism closely. No wires. No unusual attachments. He slowly opened the hatch fully, waiting for any sign of triggering mechanism. Nothing. He climbed inside the commander's position. The interior was hot, stank of oil and sweat, and was remarkably spacious compared to American tanks. Reisler spent 10 minutes examining the interior for explosive charges. He found nothing. Either the German crew hadn't had time to booby-trap the tank, or they intended to recover it themselves and didn't want to damage it. Reisler climbed back out and gave the all-clear. Chen and 2 other men entered the Tiger to conduct a more thorough search. After 30 minutes, they confirmed no booby traps were present. The Tiger was secure. Now came the harder part, moving it. A 56-ton tank with a disabled engine couldn't drive itself. It would need to be towed. American tank recovery vehicles were designed to tow Sherman tanks weighing 33 tons. The Tiger weighed nearly twice that. Reisler radioed battalion again. "We have secured the Tiger. No booby traps. Requesting M32 recovery vehicle for towing." The response was immediate and angry. "Captain Reisler, you were ordered to withdraw. German counterattack is developing in your sector. Leave the tank and return to lines immediately," Reisler acknowledged. Then he turned to his men. "Get towing cables ready? We're not leaving without this tank." What Reisler didn't tell battalion was that he had already called in a favor. Lieutenant James Morrison, commanding a tank recovery platoon, was a friend from training. Reisler had radioed Morrison directly on the recovery unit's frequency. Morrison had responded without clearing it with higher command. His M32 tank recovery vehicle was already en route to Reisler's position. Morrison arrived 45 minutes later with his recovery vehicle and a grim assessment. "Captain, I don't know if we can tow this thing. It's too heavy. The M32 might not have enough power. We'll burn out the transmission trying." Reisler had anticipated this problem. He had Chen examine the Tiger's engine. Chen reported that the cooling system was damaged, but the engine itself might still run. If they could get the engine started, even briefly, the Tiger could assist its own recovery by providing power to its tracks while being towed. This would reduce the load on the M32. The problem was starting an enemy tank's engine without documentation or training. Chen was a capable mechanic, but the Tiger's Maybach HL230P45 engine was unlike anything American forces used. It was a 12-cylinder gasoline engine producing 700 horsepower, far more powerful than American tank engines. The starting procedure was unknown. The controls were labeled in German. The systems were unfamiliar. Chen spent an hour examining the Tiger's engine compartment and control station. The damage was to the cooling system, not the engine itself. If they could get it started and running briefly without overheating, they might be able to move the tank. Chen identified what he believed was the starter control. The Tiger used an inertia starter system different from American electric starters. He wasn't completely sure how it worked, but he was willing to try. At approximately 1400 hours, with German artillery beginning to fall on nearby positions, Chen attempted to start the Tiger's engine. The first attempt failed. The engine turned over but didn't catch. Second attempt, same result. On the third attempt, the Maybach engine roared to life with a sound like no American tank made. The power was immediately obvious. The entire tank vibrated with the engine's force. If you're captivated by these incredible stories of courage and ingenuity under fire, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We bring you the untold stories of World War II that history books often overlook. Now let's see how Reisler and his team pulled off the impossible. Chen monitored the engine temperature closely. Without proper cooling, the engine would overheat quickly. They had perhaps 10 minutes of running time before risking permanent damage or fire. Morrison hooked his M32 to the Tiger, using every towing cable available. The recovery vehicle alone couldn't pull the Tiger, but with the Tiger's engine providing power to its own tracks, the combined effort might work. At 14:15 hours, they attempted the first movement. Morrison's M32 strained forward. The Tiger's tracks began turning slowly as Chen carefully applied power. The combined effort moved the 56-ton monster forward several meters. It worked, but barely. The M32 was operating at its absolute limit. The Tiger's engine temperature was climbing rapidly. Reisler calculated distance and time. They were approximately 3 kilometers from American lines. At the rate they were moving, perhaps 100 meters every 10 minutes, the recovery would take over 5 hours. And that was, if nothing went wrong. At 14:30 hours, something went wrong. German artillery began targeting their position. The Germans had spotted the recovery operation and understood what the Americans were attempting. Shells began landing with increasing accuracy around the two tanks. Morrison's crew and Reisler's men took cover during barrages, then resumed the slow towing operation between salvos. At 1500 hours, German infantry appeared on the ridgeline to the north. They were approximately 800 meters away, too far for effective small arms fire, but close enough that Reisler knew they would be radioing for reinforcements. The race was now explicit. Could Reisler's team get the Tiger to American lines before German forces arrived in sufficient strength to stop them? Reisler called battalion again. This time he was honest about the situation. We are towing the Tiger to friendly lines. We're taking artillery fire. German infantry is approaching. Request covering fire and infantry support. The response came from Colonel William Kern, the regimental commander who had been monitoring the situation. Captain Reisler, I should relieve you for disobeying direct orders. But since you've apparently lost your mind and committed us to this operation, I'm sending 2 platoons of infantry and artillery support. Get that tank back here. That's an order, not a request. American artillery began falling on German positions to the north, slowing their advance. 2 platoons from the 1st Infantry Battalion moved forward to establish a defensive perimeter around the recovery operation. The slow withdrawal continued. At 1600 hours, they had moved 1 kilometer. The Tiger's engine was overheating again. Chen shut it down to let it cool, which meant the M32 had to pull the full 56 tons alone. Progress slowed to barely 50 meters every 10 minutes. By 1700 hours, they had moved 2 kilometers. They were halfway to American lines. German artillery was intensifying. One shell hit close enough to shower the Tiger with rock fragments. Another shell disabled one of Morrison's M32's tracks. The recovery vehicle itself now needed repair. Morrison's crew worked frantically to replace the damaged track section while under artillery fire. The repair took 45 minutes. During this time, German infantry advanced to within 500 meters. American infantry engaged them in a firefight that lasted 30 minutes. Reisler watched the battle from the Tiger's commander's position and made a decision that he later described as the second stupidest thing he did that day. After deciding to capture the Tiger in the first place, he traversed the Tiger's turret manually. The 88mm gun was loaded. The German crew had abandoned the tank without unloading the main gun. Reisler had no formal training in German tank gunnery, but he understood basic principles. He aimed the massive gun at a stone building where German troops had taken position and fired. The 88mm round obliterated the building. The explosion was far more powerful than anything American tank guns produced. German infantry scattered. Reisler fired 3 more rounds at German positions, creating enough destruction that the German advance halted temporarily. American infantry and artillery officers who witnessed this would later report the surreal image of an American captain operating a captured German Tiger tank to support American infantry against German forces. The irony was not lost on anyone. At 1800 hours, Morrison's track repair was complete. The slow withdrawal resumed. At 1900 hours, they crossed into American lines. Infantry from the 1st Battalion, who had been watching the recovery operation for hours, cheered as the Tiger and its M32 tow vehicle emerged from the battlefield. Colonel Kern met Reisler personally. "Captain, you are either getting a Medal of Honor or a court-martial. I haven't decided which. Possibly both. Get that tank to the rear. Intelligence wants it immediately." The Tiger was towed to an assembly area, 3 kilometers behind the front lines. By 2100 hours, engineers and intelligence officers were swarming over it. What they found would prove Reisler's risk had been justified. The examination of Tiger 251 began immediately. Teams of engineers from the 1st Armored Division, British Army Intelligence, and Allied Forces Headquarters conducted detailed analysis. Their findings were compiled in a classified report dated May 1, 1943. The armor measurements shocked Allied engineers. The Tiger's frontal hull armor was 100 millimeters thick, angled at only slight angles. The turret front was 120 millimeters thick. Side armor ranged from 60 to 80 millimeters. This was 2 to 3 times thicker than Sherman tank armor. American 75 millimeter guns could not penetrate Tiger frontal armor at any range. Even the British 17-pounder anti-tank gun struggled to penetrate Tigers frontally beyond 1,000 meters. The Tiger, by contrast, could penetrate any Allied tank at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. The armor quality was also superior. German face-hardened armor was more resistant to penetration than comparable thickness of American armor. The Tiger's armor was not only thicker but metallurgically superior. The 88 mm Quag 36L 56 gun was analyzed extensively. This was the first time Allied engineers could examine the gun up close. The gun used a long barrel 56 calibers long, meaning 56 times the 88 mm bore diameter, providing high muzzle velocity and extreme penetration. The mounting was exceptionally stable, allowing accurate fire at long ranges. The gun sights were of higher quality than American equipment. German optics were superior. The turret traverse, when powered by the engine, was relatively fast. The Tiger could rotate its turret 360 degrees in approximately 1 minute using power traverse or 7 minutes manually. But the examination also revealed weaknesses. The Tiger's weight and complex engineering made it mechanically unreliable. The Maybach engine was powerful but temperamental. The transmission, which had to handle 56 tons, was overly complex. With 8 forward gears and 4 reverse gears, it was prone to failure. The overlapping road wheel design, which distributed weight effectively, was difficult to maintain. In muddy or frozen conditions, mud and ice would pack between the wheels and immobilize the tank. The Tiger's ground pressure, despite wide tracks, was higher than American or Soviet medium tanks. It struggled in soft ground. Most significantly, the Tiger was extraordinarily expensive and complex to manufacture. Engineers estimated it required approximately 300,000 man-hours to build one Tiger, compared to approximately 10,000 man-hours for a Sherman. The intelligence report concluded with assessments that would influence Allied tank development. The Tiger was the most formidable tank currently in service, but it had exploitable weaknesses. Its complexity meant low production numbers. Germany couldn't field Tigers in decisive quantities. Its mechanical unreliability meant many Tigers were lost to breakdowns rather than combat. Allied forces should avoid frontal engagements with Tigers, instead using mobility to attack from flanks or rear where armor was thinner. Allied tank development should not attempt to match the Tiger's armor and firepower directly, as this would result in similar production constraints. Instead, Allied tanks should emphasize reliability, numbers, and tactical flexibility. These conclusions, drawn from examining Tiger 251, shaped Allied armor doctrine for the remainder of the war. The decision not to build American super heavy tanks to match the Tiger 1-for-1 was vindicated by production statistics. Germany built 1,354 Tiger 1 tanks during its entire production run. The United States built 49,324 Sherman tanks. For every Tiger, there were approximately 36 Shermans. Even though Shermans were individually inferior, overwhelming numbers more than compensated. Tiger 251 was eventually shipped to England for more detailed analysis. British engineers conducted metallurgical testing of the armor, disassembled the engine and transmission completely, and tested the gun's penetration against various armor samples. The tank was later transferred to the United States, where it was examined by engineers at Aberdeen Proving Ground. American tank designers studying the Tiger drew different conclusions than German designers had reached. The Germans had pursued maximum individual tank capability, accepting complexity and production challenges. Americans pursued adequate capability combined with mass production, accepting that individual tanks would be inferior, but confident that numbers would prevail. The captured Tiger validated the American approach. One Tiger was superior to one Sherman, but 10 Shermans were superior to one Tiger, and America could build 10 Shermans for every Tiger Germany produced. Captain Philip Reisler was indeed both decorated and reprimanded for his actions on April 21, 1943. He received the Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism, specifically for the recovery of critical intelligence materials under fire. He also received an official reprimand for disobeying direct orders and unnecessarily risking his men. The reprimand was filed but not enforced. Colonel Kern later admitted that the intelligence gained justified the risk, though he would never officially endorse disobeying orders. Reisler's career benefited from the incident. He was promoted to major and assigned to the G2 Intelligence Section at Allied Forces Headquarters. He spent the remainder of the war analyzing German armor developments and helping develop tactics for engaging German heavy tanks. The 12 men of Reisler's intelligence section all received Bronze Stars for their roles in the recovery operation. Lieutenant Morrison received a Silver Star for his leadership of the recovery effort. Sergeant Chen, whose mechanical skills had been essential, was promoted and transferred to a technical intelligence unit where his abilities could be fully utilized. The unthinkable act of capturing and recovering Tiger 251 had immediate tactical impacts. Intelligence from the tank was distributed throughout Allied forces within weeks. Tank crews learned the Tiger's vulnerabilities: mechanical unreliability, relatively thin side and rear armor, and limited strategic mobility due to weight and complexity. They learned optimal engagement tactics: avoid frontal engagements, use mobility to flank, target the running gear to immobilize, and coordinate multiple tanks to overwhelm the Tiger's crew. These tactics were tested in subsequent battles in Italy and Northwest Europe, with positive results. Tiger kill rates improved as Allied crews learned to exploit the Tiger's weaknesses rather than confronting its strengths. The strategic impact was equally significant. Allied intelligence gained confidence that German super heavy tank development, while impressive technically, was strategically flawed. The resources Germany invested in Tigers and later King Tigers could have produced far more Panzer IVs or other medium tanks. The German decision to pursue individual tank superiority over numerical superiority was recognized as a strategic error that Allied forces should not repeat. If you're finding these stories of initiative and ingenuity as compelling as we are, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. We dive deep into the pivotal moments that shaped World War II. Now, let's explore what happened to the tank and the men who captured it. After the war, Tiger 251 was moved between various military facilities as interest in German armor technology remained high during the early Cold War. By the 1950s, the tank was in storage at Aberdeen Proving Ground, along with dozens of other World War II vehicles. In 1975, recognizing the Tiger's historical significance, the tank was restored to display condition. It became one of the centerpieces of Aberdeen's armor collection. In 2013, the historic vehicle collection at Aberdeen was transferred to Fort Benning, Georgia, as part of the new National Armor and Cavalry Museum. Tiger 251 made the journey and is now displayed prominently with signage explaining its capture and significance. The tank bears the scars of its wartime service. Artillery fragment damage is visible on the hull. The cooling system damage that led to its capture was repaired for display purposes, but the tank is maintained as a historical artifact rather than restored to pristine condition. Visitors can see the tank that Allied intelligence officers risked their lives to capture. Philip Reisler returned to Detroit after the war and resumed his career at Chrysler. He worked on tank design projects during the 1950s when Chrysler was building M48 and M60 tanks. Colleagues noted that he brought unique perspective to armor design discussions, having personally examined and even fired a Tiger tank under combat conditions. Few American tank designers could claim similar experience. Reisler rarely spoke publicly about the Tiger capture. He gave one interview to a military history journal in 1978, providing the most detailed account of the operation. When asked if he would do it again knowing the risks, he responded, "Absolutely. That tank changed how we understood German armor." Every tanker who faced a Tiger after April 1943 had better information because of what we learned. That was worth the risk. Reisler died in 1992 at age 77. His obituary mentioned his wartime service but didn't elaborate on the tiger capture. Only veterans of the 1st Armored Division and armor historians recognized his significance. Several of the men who participated in the recovery lived long enough to attend reunions and share their stories. Sergeant Chen, who had started the Tiger's engine under fire, later said, "People ask if I was scared. I was terrified, but I was also a mechanic working on the most advanced tank in the world. Part of me was absolutely fascinated by the engineering even while shells were landing around us. That's probably crazy, but that's how I remember it." Lieutenant Morrison, who had towed the Tiger with his M32 against all engineering judgment, reflected, "We shouldn't have been able to move that tank. It was too heavy. The M32 wasn't designed for it. But sometimes you don't know what's impossible until after you've done it. If someone had told me beforehand what we were attempting, I would have said it couldn't work. I'm glad nobody asked." The broader significance of the Tiger capture extends beyond the immediate intelligence gained. The operation demonstrated initiative and risk-taking that characterized American military culture at its best. Reisler had explicit orders not to approach the Tiger. He disobeyed because he recognized an opportunity that might never come again. His willingness to accept personal responsibility for that decision, knowing he might face court-martial, reflected confidence in his judgment and commitment to the mission. This type of initiative was encouraged in American military culture more than in German or other armies where strict obedience to orders was paramount. The flexibility to make decisions based on circumstances rather than rigid adherence to procedures was an American advantage throughout the war. The recovery operation also demonstrated combined arms effectiveness. Artillery supported the recovery. Infantry protected the recovery team. Tank recovery specialists provided technical expertise. Intelligence officers provided overall coordination. Different units working together achieved what no single unit could have accomplished. This integration of capabilities was characteristic of American military operations and contributed significantly to overall effectiveness. The technical intelligence process that began with Tiger II-51's capture became a model for future operations. Detailed examination by multiple teams, rapid distribution of findings to operational units, and incorporation of lessons into doctrine and training, these steps ensured that intelligence gained tactical value quickly. By late 1943, Allied forces had developed comprehensive intelligence on German armor. They knew the capabilities and limitations of Panthers, Tigers, and other German tanks. This knowledge came from multiple sources, but the first detailed examination of a Tiger came from Reisler's capture of No. 251. The unthinkable act wasn't just capturing the Tiger, it was the series of decisions that made capture possible. Ignoring explicit orders, approaching a potentially booby-trapped enemy tank, attempting to start an unknown engine under fire, towing a 56-ton tank with inadequate equipment, and fighting to defend the recovery operation while outnumbered. Each individual decision seemed unreasonable. Together, they achieved something that Allied intelligence had considered nearly impossible, obtaining an intact Tiger for detailed examination. The story raises questions about when disobeying orders is justified. Military discipline requires following orders. Without order and discipline, armies become mobs. But rigid adherence to orders without consideration of circumstances can miss opportunities or create disasters. Reisler judged that the intelligence value of capturing the Tiger justified the risk and the disobedience. His superiors ultimately agreed, though not without controversy. The question of whether subordinates should disobey orders when they believe they know better than their commanders has no simple answer. Reisler's case worked out positively. But for every Reisler whose initiative succeeded, there are cautionary examples of subordinates whose disobedience led to disaster. The distinction seems to be competence and judgment. Reisler wasn't disobeying orders out of rebellion or carelessness. He disobeyed because he possessed expertise his commanders lacked and recognized an opportunity they couldn't see from their positions. He accepted full responsibility for his decision and was prepared to face consequences. This type of calculated disobedience, based on superior knowledge of specific circumstances and acceptance of personal responsibility, is different from general disregard for authority. Modern military doctrine recognizes this tension. Officers are trained to exercise initiative within their commander's intent. The concept of mission command gives subordinate leaders freedom to determine how to achieve objectives, even if that requires deviating from specific instructions. Reisler's actions in 1943 anticipated this doctrinal development. The technological lessons from Tiger 251 influenced not just tactics, but also the broader trajectory of tank development. The examination revealed that extreme armor protection came with severe costs in mobility, reliability, and production efficiency. This informed American decisions to focus on balanced designs rather than pursuing maximum armor and firepower, regardless of other factors. Post-war American tank design emphasized reliability, maintainability, and producibility, while providing adequate protection and firepower. The M48, M60, and M1 Abrams all reflected lessons learned partly from studying captured German tanks like Tiger 251. The principle that emerged was, build tanks that are good enough to win and available in sufficient numbers to overwhelm the enemy through quantity and sustainability. This philosophy proved sound through the Cold War and beyond. American tanks were rarely the most heavily armored or armed tanks in the world, but they were reliable, available in numbers, and supported by superior logistics and training. These advantages proved more decisive than individual technical superiority. The story of capturing Tiger 251 ultimately demonstrates that wars are won by soldiers and leaders who recognize opportunities, take calculated risks, and execute boldly under pressure. The unthinkable becomes achievable when people refuse to accept that something cannot be done. Captain Philip Reisler, Sergeant Robert Chen, Lieutenant James Morrison, and the other men who captured Tiger 251 did the unthinkable because they understood that the potential reward justified the risk. They succeeded because they combined technical competence, tactical awareness, and determination that wouldn't accept failure. Their achievement gave Allied forces knowledge that saved lives and contributed to victory. That's why their story deserves remembering. Not because they captured a famous German tank, but because they demonstrated the qualities, initiative, competence, courage, and leadership that define military excellence. Those qualities are timeless. The specific technologies change, but the human factors remain constant. Good soldiers who recognize opportunities and act boldly will always be force multipliers, regardless of era or technology. Tiger 251 sits in a museum today, a monument to German engineering and to American audacity. Visitors photograph it, marvel at its size and power, and read about its technical specifications. But the real story isn't the tank itself. The real story is the 12 American soldiers who looked at an impossible objective and decided to achieve it anyway. They captured the Tiger. Then they did the unthinkable. They got it home.